I was reading Stephen Covey's research on how the highest performing organizations actually spend a large amount of their time more in the thinking and planning than in the actual execution. And this aligns with what a lot of research papers are coming out with right now, saying that we kind of equate productive with being busy, but sometimes that's not actually the case. Sometimes it's the people who don't necessarily look busy, or you wonder, like, what are they doing? Or like, why are they away? Or whatever, that are actually moving the needle most. And it can be because they're actually having that time to step back to think. And so when they do act, they're acting in the right direction. They're, energized, and they can do things in half the time. And I certainly find myself in that situation at times now. My life is very full and very busy by choice. But the more I step back, the better the job I can do. But I was thinking about how we hire and how we recognize high performers. And I was thinking about my own health business, Wellness Embodied, and how that actually ties in to the Endures framework. And there's a real link here. So first of all, we start with envision, which is, does that person share your vision? So people who are on your leadership team, they should be vision multipliers. They shouldn't be constantly quashing. That doesn't mean they have to agree with you all the time. But if you're constantly in an argument or constantly having to explain yourself, then they're not multiplying your vision. They're actually dragging the energy down. So your leadership team should be taking on their own little pieces of the puzzle and, elevating that, right? Using their own skill sets. The second piece around navigate, people that are high performers, you can trust them to do the things. So they are taking the right steps in the right direction towards your vision. Now, they may need some guidance, but how they behave on an ordinary day in their lives, outside of work as well as in work, is really indicative of who they are. So they're not just these one-hit wonders who did this one amazing project and then burnt out. Or they're not necessarily the people that got the highest marks in uni, or they're not the people who can wax lyrical about all the latest research, but they're the people who consistently have the right habits, the right behaviours that keep them on track. Now, the third piece is around drive. And so grit is really important in life. Grit, resilience, adaptability, all of these things are things that we are losing. So what background did they come from? Are they somebody who's maybe moved from another country? Did their family have a small business? Have they pushed themselves in some level of hardship? Now, this aligns with my whole model of endurance athletes being great employees, because if you participate in endurance sport, you have to learn to push yourself. That's just how it is. And you can't blame other people. Now, the fourth piece is using recovery, and this is around pacing. So there seems to be this real trend right now in the unis in Australia. And I heard it the other day from one of my team, even when she was in uni 3 or 4 years ago, of the unis telling people, particularly in healthcare, that they're going to burn out. You're going to burn out in this amount of time. This is going to happen. But without actually equipping people with the skill sets to thrive. And how do you look after yourself? How do you pace yourself? Do you plan your breaks? Do you, take a proper downtime, like a proper lunch break, and actually step outside? Do you use your little micro breaks in a nourishing way, or do you sit there scrolling your phone? Do you go in the bathroom even with your phone? Do you have notifications popping up all the time? These things are self-regulation things, right? That are really essential for leaders and high performers. Then we have the capacity to refocus and reset. And in a team member, sometimes this is, how do they take feedback? How do they take negative things from clients? Can they focus on the positives? How do they make sure they come back on track? How do they not get derailed by bright, shiny objects? If they're full of ideas, do they actually execute these things? Or do they think if they tell somebody something once, then it's going to just magically appear, which would be lovely, but that is not actually leadership. And then do they constantly seek to elevate? So do they have a growth mindset? Because certainly most small businesses, you don't have the time to be training somebody out of a fixed mindset if they don't want to get out of there. That's the hard reality. And this is why small business can be so dynamic. You can make decisions. It's a really great space to be in. I mean, this is why I'm a business owner and why I'm really passionate about working with people who can actually make a change, right? So how is that person elevating themselves? And then finally, the support systems they have around them. So we can all cater, and I have catered on repeat to, people's health issues or things that come up at home and so on. But in a workplace, if people come in and there's always an issue and they have absolutely no support at home, and they're engaged in these toxic relationships, and they come into the workplace and they bitch, moan and whine, for want of better words, it is really difficult, I would say nigh on impossible, for that person to be sustainably high performing. So I invite you to have a think about this, and have a think about how you hire, not just for competence, but also for cultural fit and for capability going into the future, and how you might use Endures to help you out. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow for more from Endures. Bye.